Hello, and welcome to another episode of DecentraLounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your institutional SOC-II Type 2 certified, truly decentralized, self-owned and managed bare metal staking service provider. Welcome to today's episode, where we will discuss Stork, an incredible data oracle solution that can be used for any blockchain protocol. As the website states, Stork's open data market unlocks access to decentralized, reliable, and unique data, empowering you to build your vision without compromise. Joining us to discuss Stork today, we have Meredith Pitkoff, CEO and co-founder of Stork, who has led the company for more than 2 years. Previously, Meredith served as chief of staff and partnerships at SafeGraph, a company that also has a foundation in data science, as well as a senior product manager at Samba TV, which also revolved around data by providing a better viewing experience. It is safe to say that Meredith's experience and expertise in the data domain is helping Stork make groundbreaking strides in the Web3 space, which is why the project has garnered partners including SUI, OKX, Telegram Open Network, and most recently announced it will be the main data provider for Monad. Meredith, welcome to the show. Why don't we start off by discussing your background in data and what led you to the transition into the Web3 industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. So my background in data really started right after graduating college. I joined a company at that time called LiveRamp, which has had a very interesting trajectory. Started out as a startup in the MarTech space, really responsible for connecting all the different identifiers that power targeted advertising and measurement. They ended up getting acquired by a public company called Axiom, and then overtaking that company, Axiom itself, to become a standalone public company, and selling off Axiom to an agency. But I think it really seeing that trajectory of a data-focused infrastructure company influenced my career trajectory and what I was interested in. So I started out at LiveRamp more focused on go-to-market within the solutions engineering org. I actually built that there, and then moved on to a smaller startup, seed stage, working in the marketing tech space as well. We actually built a data marketplace at that time that was focused on second-party data sharing for primarily D2C companies. We were then acquired by Samba TV, which was focused on collecting TV data. So really matching content to what's appearing on individual or household TVs to power brand measurement and added reach on top of linear TV campaigns in the digital space. And then, as you mentioned, I went on to SafeGraph, which is more focused on the location data side of things. So rich history or experience, I think, within the data space. Most of that time was spread across go-to-market product and more operations of chief of staff. Love the startup life. Don't think really kind of just like love building things from 0 to 1. And what really brought me into the Web3 space, I have to say, is I had a couple of friends or former colleagues who worked in Web3. They left that first company I mentioned to start a crypto native high frequency trading firm. And I shared office space with them in 2017 when they first got started. I really saw the massive growth they experienced. And, it seemed like this is where I had to be. They convinced me to jump ship. So I actually joined their firm in 2022, Dexterity Capital. Started out as their chief of staff, but really with the intent of incubating a startup out of their trading firm, NBC. Knew it was going to be in the data space, given my background. And as I started diving into what was happening on chain and DeFi, realized there was massive opportunity to really innovate within the Oracle space. At that time, there really was kind of a monopoly. Everyone was using Chainlink. People were really afraid to go up against Chainlink, and maybe I like a good challenge, but it seemed very exciting to try and bring an upstart and more a different design into the space.
It's interesting. Going back, I was reading through some of the blog posts on Stork, and one of the first blog posts from last summer was talking about that idea, this notion of old gods, that we have these legacy systems such as Chainlink, where, going back to when you were really getting interested and started in the Web3 space, how it was sort of the mark of approval, the stamp of approval, that you are now blessed by Chainlink and your chain became somehow legitimate. But really nothing has evolved all that much, right? Like these oracles that started back then, they're not really customizable. They're just doing the same kind of thing. And that seems like what Stork is really trying to kind of reinvent and come at this at a very different angle. So why don't we explore a little bit more about what makes Stork unique and how you're doing some of these things, like your approach for design and everything else with building out partnerships and the protocols that you want to work with?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, to give the space some credit, I do think in general, the Oracle space has come a long way in the last 2.5 years since I first started working on Stork. That said, tons of room for improvement, and I hope to see everyone really push the limits of what's possible here. That said, when we got started, really, as I mentioned, Chainlink was the main Oracle. As you mentioned, it was a stamp of approval. It actually felt very IBM-esque. We were explicitly told, like, Chainlink might not be the best solution, but I'm not going to get fired over choosing Chainlink, which was pretty funny to hear. But just to paint a little bit more specifically what was happening, Chainlink and most oracles were ecosystem specific, right? So we still only had a handful of chains actually live at that time, and it would take a long time for Chainlink to actually deploy on a new chain. Timelines could look like 12 to 18 months, and it would come with a price tag of millions of dollars. And what you get for that is periodic updates of a cryptocurrency price feed, that would update on the order of every 6 hours or once a day, depending on what it was. And there were no guarantees around adding support for new assets as they, were listed. So that was like shocking, honestly, being relatively new to the space to realize that this is how the market worked. And I also noticed a dynamic where specifically amongst derivatives exchanges, they started building their own price engines or price feeds in-house, and they tried to obfuscate it. Like, they weren't proud of it. They saw that as a point of centralization that would help result in them losing trust with their end users. So they'd maybe use Chainlink in some limited capacity and highlight that pretty prominently in the docs, and then really buried down deep, you would see, oh, and we actually have these real-time price feeds that we built ourselves. So anyways, that was the problem we wanted to set out to solve. And really the mission was, we want to open up data access. We want to provide incredibly low latency feeds, because we took a bet at the time that the on-chain derivatives market was going to blow up. I think it honestly exceeded our expectations in how popular it became. But we knew you needed much lower latency data feeds, and having us incubated out of a high frequency trading firm in the space, we really did have to start that in our DNA on the engineering side to be able to get the infrastructure in place for that. There needs to be incredible reliability, right? Because this is infrastructure that is powering on-chain finance. You never want to have downtime. You never want to report an inaccurate price. But also, in order for these products to remain competitive, they need to be able to add new assets. So the first version of that was, we should be able to support, or scale to support, any arbitrary crypto asset, and incredibly fast. And the decision that we made in order to really facilitate these different items of massive data catalog, incredibly low latency, high frequency updates, was we had to build this off chain. And that was like quite unique and risky at the time. So what we decided is, we took the traditional Oracle infrastructure architecture that you'd be used to seeing, which is a decentralized publisher network that then sends data to an aggregator. And then, that end result is stored to a smart contract that then is accessible to any protocol to use. Except instead of having the publishers send data directly on chain to then be aggregated, we decided we'd do this off chain. Our aggregator would live off chain as well. And instead, we heavily rely on cryptographic signatures. We pass through all the individual updates as well from the publishers. And then there's a hash of the algorithm that is used to calculate the aggregate value. And basically what this means is, we don't have to worry about gas every step of the way. So we can add new assets, or our publishers can support new assets without really having to weigh the costs associated with that. And we can support updates. We've tested, we can support updates up to every millisecond, but at this point in time, no one's really ready for that, in our opinion. So we're doing it every 500 milliseconds as the default update frequency. And And then, what the end user gets is basically every input is delivered directly to them, is cryptographically signed, and can be verified both off-chain and on-chain. So while we have introduced this off-chain architecture that is non-traditional, everything can be verified on-chain. So we still believe that we are removing any trust assumptions in the flow. And one thing I'll just mention before pausing is like, this was very risky and a lot of people were nervous to use it, but it's actually become the status quo to a certain point at this point in time. Chainlink now has an oracle themselves that they call Data Streams, which is an off-chain oracle. Pyth most recently just announced Pyth Laser, which doesn't even use their PythNet, which is their Solana fork or SVM chain. So they have an off-chain oracle now. And then I believe Switchboard and Redstone have them as well. So it's quite exciting that we, really invented this model, and we're seeing it get picked up more widely in the space as well.
How difficult was it to engineer that? Because it seems like from just a technical standpoint, what you've accomplished, which kudos, by the way, and especially interesting seeing how others are now following that model that you sort of innovated. Was it something that was a long time in building and trying it out to really kind of work out the kinks? Because it doesn't seem like that's something very easy to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first version of this, we went live with the first version in September of 2022. So just context setting, we started in May of 2022. Day one, transparently, we thought we were going to be a StarkNet native oracle. We built an on-chain oracle, quickly realized like within a month, we can't deliver on the promises of an unlimited data catalog by having this whole thing on chain. And that's when we pivoted. So it was summer of 2022 that we pivoted. In September, we released the first version of the oracle. It was used by Apex Pro, which is the derivatives exchange by the Bybit team. And so they were the first ones to use it in production. I think mainnet went live for them at the end of October. At that point in time, we were only supporting, much smaller amount of feeds. I think they probably went live with about 10 feeds at that time. Updates were also on the order of every 5 seconds. So, it only took us a few months to get that out the door. The hardest part definitely is actually being able to support an infinite scale of number of assets to make sure that all of our publishers, that the tech that they're running doesn't slow down. The signing piece is very expensive. That's what can be actually slow things down. So their ability to rapidly support hundreds of assets at any given time. And then in terms of, there are massive amounts of data points that we're sending out, right? So we're working with about 50 protocols right now. A lot of those are derivatives exchanges, subscribing to tens of assets individually. And, we're processing tens of millions of data points every single day. So it is a lot of data. The hardest part was really building out the redundancy and the architecture to make sure that there's never downtime or slowdown.
In addition to the incredible work you guys have been doing in the oracles, I'm curious, can you kind of also explain what the open data market is, like how it operates, maybe who some of the key participants would typically be, and then what type of data is actually like on there and available, and how is it used?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea behind the open data market is, Stork. We don't want Stork Labs, for instance, to have control over every data point that's made available. So we have a standardized way of saying to our how is an index price calculated, or how is mark price calculated, which mark prices are used by derivatives exchanges for liquidations. But we also want to open it up that any individual publisher, even if they haven't been vetted by Stork Labs, let's say, can go to market and say, I have this really valuable data asset that I think should be used by X, Y, and Z. Or if, let's say there's a blockchain themselves that wants to build their own oracle to their own specs, that they have the flexibility to do that, and they can pick and choose what data providers they want to include in their own aggregator. So that was really the vision behind the open data market, of just creating more openness, more flexibility in what type of data is available to on-chain builders. In terms of who's participating currently on the open data market, I will say like 95% plus use cases are still very focused on cryptocurrency related data points. So, whether it's prices, implied volatility, I think those are probably honestly the two main redemption rates more recently for like staked assets. The folks that are providing those data feeds look like a mix of some infrastructure companies. So examples being Imstones is one of the first publishers that joined our network, as well as a handful of trading firms, crypto native trading firms. And then I'd say the most unique participant that we have currently in the open data market would be Kalshi, who provides data on their it basically has an integration with us to provide data on how any of their prediction markets are trading, which was, exciting leading up to the election earlier last year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so that's really interesting hearing just about the open market and how flexible that is. And getting back to the previous part with just the sort of speeds that you're capable of. Obviously, one of the big major announcements was Monad, right? And they're trying to target that, sub 1 second blockchain. Other protocols like Mega ETH out there trying to get these things down to where it's, minimal latency. It's more like a Web 2 experience for the user. So is that sort of why you're wooing over many of these really highly performant blockchains, is that they really just like sort of the architecture that you put behind everything on Stork?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a very obvious fit for us to be working with high performance, low latency, low block time blockchain. So it's very exciting for us as well to see a number of these new blockchains popping up. It almost feels like every week at least most recently, these last few weeks, there is a new high performance, low latency L1. So we're really excited about that trend. We're excited about pushing the limits on how often we can do updates as well. No set timelines, but we probably will be increasing the frequency from 500 milliseconds. I anticipate given the progress that we're seeing in the space. But yeah, for Monad specifically, I probably should disclose, I think, there are a number of oracles working with Monad, but we have a very close relationship with them. We've known the team for a couple of years now, and we're excited to be a day one partner there.
That's awesome. So, I mean, obviously you guys have already accomplished a ton on your roadmap, but it sounds like there's so much more to come, beyond just reducing the times down to even a single millisecond. And what else is going to be coming for the Stork product pipeline in general, or just the tech? And what are you really excited about for the future of Stork as you move deeper into this year and beyond?
Yeah. So, I don't want to front run any Stork announcements, but I guess something I'll tease out is, as I described the architecture that Stork has, I think very obviously the main point of centralization that exists with Stork is our aggregator service. And while we have addressed that, we believe by creating more transparency, we are also interested in approaching this from a few different ways to increase our decentralization. So we have a couple of product announcements coming soon that will be addressing that, probably coming out shortly after this episode. So really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I can't share too many specifics at this time. And then we also are working with a number of blockchains to add support for new sorts of products. So we, like many other oracles, are going to be introducing VRF, which is random number generation, later this quarter, and we are rapidly expanding out to new blockchains. So we recently released programmatic deploys, which basically means that we can instantaneously deploy to any new EVM chain. Last quarter, we actually added 25 new blockchain integrations, and we expect that to continue to scale, in the coming weeks and months. So really excited to see us continue to partner with more and more of these ecosystems as they pop up.
Wow, sounds really exciting. I mean, and obviously the one thing I have to kind of broach as a topic, just because on the heels of DeepSeek and all these other things that are happening with AI, we know AI is incredibly data hungry, right? It's so much of it just requires from these LLMs. is Stork thinking about how it can approach that aspect of the market with AIs, or we're seeing all these agentic economies popping up on virtuals and other places? Does Stork have any thoughts about how that's going to work with AI as this becomes more of a reality for us all?
Yeah. So, specifically within DeFi, DeFi with an AI, we are starting to partner with some of these agent toolkits to have direct integrations to use our price feeds, which is very natural fit in our opinion. So, specifically within that respect, we're going to make our price feeds available for these agents in the DeFi space. And then beyond that, one of the things that we're really interested in is this concept of data provenance. So, in as we see, more and more agents, increased usage of AI, one thing that is going to be incredibly important is actually being able to verify the authenticity of data. Where did it originate from? How was it transformed? So, both data provenance and traceability. And our tech stack was actually very much designed to treat those two things as first-class citizens. So we're starting to look into how that can help power more verifiable AI in the future.
Not gonna lie, that sounds awesome. Because sometimes when it starts hallucinating, I'm like, am I hallucinating? Is that information right? Or am I just wrong? So that's gonna be an incredible tool in the space that is highly needed. But Meredith, we really appreciate your time today. For the listeners that want to know how to get in touch with you, how to get in touch with the team, what are the best places that they can reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Twitter handle is @StorkOracle. And then also, you can always reach out to me directly. My email address is meredith@stork.network.
Amazing. And for those of you that are listening, all those will be linked in the description below. Again, Meredith, thanks so much for your time today. We're excited for what Stork and what you guys are building. We're excited for the listeners to kind of get into it and start utilizing it and figuring out ways they can help support you guys. And hopefully some cool new partnerships come out of this. But for those of you that are listening, thank you again. We'll see you next time on DecentraLounge.
Thanks so much, gang. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.